All right, we are live.
All right. I think we can jump in. Okay, sounds good. Lisa, hi. So
Hi,
excited.
Lauren.
So excited to be here with you today to celebrate the Rachel experiment. Congratulations on your second book.
Thank you so much. And thank you for taking part of your holiday weekend to do this with me. I really appreciate it.
No, I'm so glad to talk to you, especially after the year Cecily and being able to now be back with you for a second. How have you been feeling? How has the launch been?
It's been really interesting and overwhelming because part of it still feels so surreal. Like, how do I have two books out already? How is that a thing?
Yeah.
Like, I keep saying, like, part of me still feels like this is some sort of long con and I'm just being punked somewhere because this still doesn't feel really real. And I also have to take a moment to thank you because not only are you doing this, you were incredibly kind and generous to give me an amazing blood for the Rachel experiment. So I can't thank you enough for that.
No, I was so
Thank you,
excited to be
thank you,
asked.
thank you. Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
No, of course. It was such an enjoyable read. Rachel was one of my favorite characters from The Year Cecily. So, as you know, I was very excited to read her story. And I'm glad that we got it so quickly. So, to kind of kick things off and start off with setting the stage, tell us what the Rachel experiment is about.
Well, the Rachel experiment is basically an opposites attract and one night stand romance. Like you mentioned, we meet Rachel as a secondary character in The Year Cecily. And when I wrote her, like you, I immediately fell in love with her. And I'm like, this girl's got to get a book at some point. When the time came, like just pairing her with Luke seemed to be the a natural solution. And then so the book basically starts with she gets a promotion and she gets transferred from to her company's San Francisco office. So which is how she ends up reconnecting with Cecily and Adrian and the rest of the gang over there. And the problem is this is a promotion, but she has 6 months to prove herself to be able to lead her team well. And she is not the most people person in the world. So she's like me, she's an awkward turtle. She doesn't exactly relate the best to people sometimes. And things kick off when she decides that she's just going to try to experiment, like being social and talking to people at her local bar. And there's tequila involved, and I firmly believe no good ever comes from tequila. She runs into who she calls Mr. GQ, Luke. There is an incident where she rides a mechanical bull. There's tequila involved, and they end up back at his place for a one-night stand. She leaves first thing the next morning. They're not supposed to ever see each other again in life, but they meet up a few weeks later, and Luke proposes a deal. He is a people person for reasons passing understanding. I don't understand them. I respect that they're out there. But so he says like he can help her with those networking, social skills, and help her develop those leadership skills with her team so she can nail the promotion. And in return, she is a financial analyst, so he has been thinking about opening his own law practice. So she's going to use her skills to do budgeting, and some market research and budgets and do some projections and things for him to figure out how best for him to open his business. And they decide that moving forward, if it's best if things just stay platonic, all clothes are staying in. And things just kind of take off from there.
They do take off from there. And so thank you for that overview. When you were writing The Year Cecily, did you know that Rachel would always get the next book in the series, or how did that come about? What inspired you to give Rachel her own book?
Well, actually, she wasn't in the original. Rachel wasn't in the original version. She appeared after my agent and I talked about. Cecily originally started as a novella, and my agent and I decided that we were just going to take the novella, rip it apart, and then expand it to a full length. And that is when Rachel got came into the picture. And I, like I said, I loved her the minute she appeared on the page. And I thought, like, oh, this girl, like, you always, you know, those characters when you write them, when you read them, they appear on the stage, and you're like, oh yeah, this is sequel bait. They're definitely going to get a book coming up, like down the line. This is 100% setting it up. And I just felt the same way with Rachel. I just felt like at some point I need to write a book for her. But originally, when my agent and I talked about submitting this new series, I was thinking maybe I could Luke. I kind of felt the same way about Luke because he was such a good sport about that whole blind date thing. I was like, and he took it in stride. I'm like, I feel bad for you. I need to make it up to you. So I was thinking maybe Luke and agent could be like a friends to lovers sort of thing. But that just didn't pan out because the more I thought about it, it just didn't feel right. It didn't work for me because in my brain, it wasn't clicking. Like the story wasn't there. And in my head, I just realized the problem was I thought they were just way too similar. It would be boring and there was no story there. And then I thought, well, what about if I kill two birds with one stone and pair them with Rachel? Like, you know, awkward, like not a people person Rachel, and smooth talking people person Southern gentleman Luke, and the opposites attract, like sparks were there, and like this could work. So for me, that's kind of how it came about. But I'm sure that same thing has happened to you when you're writing Lunar Love and your other books. Like there are some side characters you're like, you're definitely getting a book at some point, right? Like, and you can tell. Like some of them just stand out there. They appear and they're like, hey, I'm here and I'm getting a book, you know?
Yeah, I definitely think Rachel, I'm so glad she got her own book. And something that you mentioned is that she is this awkward turtle and she isn't a people person. And something that I resonated with about Rachel was her kind of like the social interactions that she has with people, but also in certain situations and scenarios where I was like, oh my gosh, like I, in a way, felt so seen about like how to, like certain times, right? There are certain texts that come through where she's like, is it, you know, which time is it? Like, which time are we going with? Like, that is such a real situation for me a lot of the times where I'm like, can we just pick one? Like, I'm not sure how to read between the lines here. Even like the birthday gift dilemma of like, you know, giving cash. So like these real scenarios that like I love Rachel for that reason. I felt like that, you know, maybe some would call it like a little bit of social anxiety of kind of like around how do you respond in situations. And certainly I feel like I have that many times. So I really loved seeing it on the page.
Yeah.
And so how did you go about writing, like coming up with that? Is that something that like you researched to understand how Rachel acts in those scenarios? And what did that look like?
A lot of it is kind of how I would react.
Yeah.
like that scene where she makes that comment about sorority girls, and then her like her coworker's like, I'm a sorority. Like, what does that mean? And then she goes in the bathroom and has a freak out. I was like,
Yeah,
I offended her. I put my mouth in it. She's going to hate me forever. Like, I have felt that way.
Oh yeah.
Like, I have felt that way. So it was just like channeling kind of like how I feel. And I have had readers who also like said that part resonated with them too, because they too are like Rachel. They're convinced, oh my God, I said something awful. They're going to hate me forever. Like, I just ruined everything. And then she goes back and they're like, you were fine. And I'm like, and then in my mind, I was like, really? So I just spent like 10 minutes in the bathroom freaking out. And you're telling me like, I didn't have to do that. It was all in my head. I'm like, seriously?
Yes,
Seriously?
it's real. It is very real.
And I totally relate to that because like when you're making plans with a group of friends and someone's like, oh, Sunday works. And then you're like, well, what time? And then you're like, somebody just pick a time.
I know.
Somebody. And then like,
Yeah.
and I had to like Rachel explain it, and she's like, "Well, I want to be precise because how else am I going to know how much time to give myself to get there? Like, give me a time." And then she's like, "It's not being rude. I don't think I'm being rude. I'm just asking for proper planning."
Yes.
And so like, and yes, and there are a lot of times when you just get a text and you're like, because text is just, when you read a text, it's just the letters. Like, you don't hear the tone, you don't hear the nuance, you don't hear the delivery. And sometimes the person sending it, just be like, "Hey, what's up?" And like, "Hey," we're like, "Hey, what are you doing?" We're like, and you're hearing is, "Hey, what are you doing?" Like, sometimes your mind just jumps to the worst conclusion, and brains are awful sometimes.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I really appreciated seeing that on the page. And something else that I appreciated seeing on the page is Asian representation. As you know, I love to see that. And something with the Year of Cecily too is it's so important to see ourselves reflected on the page, on screens, in media, across the board. And so how has it been? Now you have another book with Asian representation in romance. What does that feel like?
I remember I was just talking with Alexis Daria about it while I was in the trenches writing these books, and I was just like banging my head against the wall. And Alexis like had to remind me, there are people out there who want and need these stories. There are people out there who are looking to see themselves in the pages of a book, in a romance, and so that they can see themselves getting that happy ending like everybody else. So what you're doing, think about that and just cut out the noise and focus on what you're doing, because it's important, because our voices and our stories do matter. And that was part of the reason why I asked my publisher to let me release Rachel during May for AAPI Heritage Month, because I really wanted to to highlight the fact that like I am just I'm just one in a very a small drop in the ocean. There's so many more of us out there who need to be sharing our stories as well. And that is one of the things I really appreciate about what Jackie Lau has been doing, where she's been highlighting a lot of romances this month written by Asian American authors, and and connecting with her and JC Lee and you and Kathy Yardley and and Courtney Lund and it's like a Snyder and so many other Asian authors. It's been so super important, because, and Jeannie Lin, who I think may be one of the first among us to write Asian romances that are historicals. Like, I don't think there were any before her. I don't think. I could be wrong. I'm not Steve Ammendow, the historian, but and Sherry Thompson. Like, I just know Jeannie and Courtney and Sherry have been trailblazers and put cracks in that ceiling for me and for so many of us. So I owe them a huge debt. And it feels good to know that I'm just trying to do my part.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this has been something you've experienced, but there are a lot of times, like especially with like that authors with marginalized backgrounds, when we write our stories, sometimes it can be hard because we're just writing our own experience and our perspective. And sometimes it almost feels like we're tasked with writing and having to be able to represent the whole Asian community. And that is just unrealistic, because I could only write what I went through. And it's going to be different from you. It's going to be different from JC. It's going to be different from Courtney or Jackie, who's Canadian, or Mia Hopkins. And sometimes like readers get really offended, and like I know authors who said, like, I've gotten emails where I've written basically like things that or my experience, but they're saying that is not my experience, that is not how Asian representation is, and that breaks my heart, and that really frustrates me a lot. And I think the only solution to that is there just more of us need to be out there sharing our story, so the Asian experience isn't a monolith. So we need to like have all of us sharing our voices, so the whole experience can be represented. So it can't be just a handful expected to speak for the whole community, which is ridiculous and unrealistic.
Certainly cannot, one book cannot be everyone's experience. And certainly with when I write mixed race Asian American characters, it is a fraction of the entire experience. Even from character to character in my book, it's their experiences are they bond over what it feels like, but they are different experiences, and my experience also differs from theirs. And characters in future books will have different experiences even from those characters.
Yeah.
So yeah, really it's a kaleidoscope of experiences.
Right. Like I am like a first, second generation. Like my parents came over here from Taiwan. Like my experience is not going to be similar to like an Asian family, like Chinese American family from California whose family had came over during the gold rush and been here for like generations. It's just not going to be the same. And I, there are some things that like they experience that I won't, and vice versa. And I agree with you 100%. It just depends on story to story and character to character. And so it just depends.
Yeah. Okay, so then going back to the Rachel experiment, there are a lot of different types of scenes in this book. What was your favorite scene to write?
I really had fun with that. The first scene where there was a week-long text conversation where Rachel reports back on what she learned about each of her coworkers after Luke gives her her homework assignment. So we find out, her coworker Brian is a basketball player, and then her coworker Constantina is like going to Italy, and we find out one of her coworkers is cheating. I really had fun with that. And when one of my readers, Sally Kilpatrick, read it, she said she felt that was really well done because that text format works better, and it kind of shows the development of their relationship, and and reveals about their characters instead of them having to sit down and talking about it. It was a fun way. And I just had to stick that thing about like how much imperialism and colonialism suck, at the end when they were talking about, because Constantina said her family did genealogy research on the family tree, and Rachel was just kind of wondering, I'm from Taiwan, but maybe there's indigenous in me, or the Portuguese and the Dutch were there for a while, and the Japanese, so who knows? Like, and then Luke was like, well, you have a mix of all that. That's kind of pretty cool. And she's like, yeah, but the way that European ancestry came in my DNA may not be so cool. So I had fun with that. And I really like the scene where this came later in the revisions. Like we can talk about that later, when my editor had me kind of just go back and redo it because she thought the first draft I read her was a good start, but kind of veered off course. I kind of really did love the scene after the Black Women, as she just goes to Cecily, a total mess. She doesn't even, like, at first she's like, I shouldn't even be here, I'm leaving, and then like she gets caught at the last moment, and I felt like I really liked that bonding moment between them and how it like kind of really cemented their friendship. Like that I guess that is kind of a running theme in my books. I do love writing about female friendships because I think romantic love and relationships is something that we really highlight in romance, and rightfully so, but I think all sorts of relationships are important, like family relationships, friend relationships, and I like, my friends are really important to me, like especially my writing friends. Like I could not have made it through to get to where I am here without them. And I prefer stories where women support each other, lift each other up, because so many times women are pitted against each other and seem to tear each other down. And I'm not here for that.
Yeah.
Because that's really not been my experience. So like all the authors that I've met have been so incredibly kind and generous and supportive. And so that's why those were just two of some of my favorite scenes.
Yeah, no, that's great. Another scene that I really loved was when they're talking about how Rachel and her family does hot pot for Thanksgiving. And I like this a lot because, one, it's super real. Like my family did that for Christmas this past year. And I also really like the discussion around tradition and how even if it's unfamiliar, Luke's family was so open to joining and learning about it and doing it with Rachel. And so is that how you celebrate? What traditions do you have in your family or that you celebrate now?
Oh, thank you for mentioning that. And I did love that scene where the parents are just like driving the two of them crazy and embarrassing the hell out of them. And honestly, I really do feel that if Rose and Naomi ever did team up, like the world should be scared. Yeah. And I think part of one of the things I kind of wanted to show, like, they are different people. They're two different people and their families are different, but underneath, they're really not that different. Like, like there was a part when Luke is like, well, my mom's the Southern Belle. She believes in manners. And that is something I related to. Like growing up, like that was like the worst sin you could commit. Just go out there and act up and behave badly and make people think like my parents did not do their job in raising me correctly to know better. That was like the worst sin. And like kind of one of the things I kind of wanted to show was that underneath, like a lot of like we definitely have more similarities than differences. Even an Asian American family and a Southern family, like some of the roots are just really, really similar. Yeah. And as for Thanksgiving, that was my Thanksgiving growing up, actually, Lauren. Like, I really did not do the traditional Thanksgiving turkey, cranberry, pumpkin pie until like when I went to law school and a friend of mine invited me for Friendsgiving. Like, that was how we did Thanksgiving. Like, I grew up in a restaurant family. That was one of the few handful of days my parents would close the restaurant for the day. We would have hot pot and we would go to Blockbuster. We would rent a couple of movies and that was my Thanksgiving. And traditions do change over the years. And now for the past couple of years, what my sister and I have done is I would go down to where she lives near the DC area. And there is an amazing there's Taiwanese restaurant in Manassas. So we get a bunch of takeout from there. And we just celebrate Thanksgiving that way. Like we have Taiwanese food for Thanksgiving. We don't do turkey.
Yeah, we do Peking duck.
Oh gosh.
The buns, so good. All of it, the works. Yeah, it's so good.
I know. Like I remember my family was out for a meal one time at a restaurant and we ordered the duck. And my dad got so mad because he felt the server was not doing a proper job carving up the duck and leaving too much meat on the bones. And we had to stop him from getting up and taking like the knife and fork away from the poor server. Like, just leave it. It's okay.
I know, you're table side, so you can always see what's being carved up.
And he was so mad because he's like, leave it. Look at that. It's so wrong. And I'm like, Dad. But yeah. But Peking duck is so good. That is an excellent tradition.
Yeah, excellent. Definitely. So this is now your second book, and you published The Year Cecily in January. What has been your favorite part of your publishing journey so far?
Just hearing feedback from readers who actually who tagged me and on Instagram and saying like actually nice things, who read my book and don't seem to hate it.
always nice. Yes.
Right. Like, I don't know about you, but every time I get that notification and then there's like tagged you in a post and I'm like, do you get that feeling in your stomach or is that just me? I get that feeling.
Yeah, I haven't had the experience of being tagged in a super negative review.
No, I haven't either. But
yeah, luckily. But you never know what you're walking into when you're tagged in anything.
Exactly. And it's especially been gratifying to hear from Asian readers who say, like, oh my God, this is me and my family. I remember I was on my podcast with Karen and Mandy, and Karen was like, oh my God, that part in the Cecily where Cecily and Rachel like find out their parents have been like comparing them against each other their whole lives, and she's like, that is so me. Like she was like, that is so real. Like that happens. I'm like, yep, I got that, and she got that too. And apparently that's a universal thing, and it was really gratifying to hear that it resonated with readers and rang true to them. Like that meant a lot to me too. So yeah, I mean, like to go back to what I said earlier, like it's just about like what Alexis said, like just keep in mind who you're writing it for and who's out there and who wants and needs these stories. It can be hard when you're fighting with the keyboard and it sounds like nothing is happening, but and you think these are the worst like 500 words I haven't written in the history of writing, but you got to remember why you're doing it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's such a roller coaster of emotions too. You're like, what are these words even? And you're like, okay, I think that these are, like Dee said, this is really going to like be a good, something will resonate. And then you're like, then you go back to, oh no,
It's garbage.
What does this
it's utter
mean?
garbage.
Yeah.
Like, I know we talked about this because we were, for the Steamy Con fundraiser, we were donated up annotated copies. So I'm rereading Cecily, and I'm like, I feel like I'm just cringing at every mistake I feel like I see. And I don't know if, like, I'm sure yours was fine, but for me, I'm like, oh God, this sentence could have been written so much better. Like I used bright 2 lines up. Why did I repeat myself like that? Or it's like, it's horrible.
It is hard. And the annotation experience, I was nervous to go back and read because at that point it was like 2 months after the book was out. And so there's literally nothing that you can do at that point. And so you're reading it, it's a different experience because you're like, I just have to go into this, like, enjoying it, being open to it and not reading with a critical eye, because it is very hard to reread work that you can't do anything about anymore. It's really hard.
Yes. Like I came away thinking like, I have no business trying to publish books. Like this is just, but like you said, like there's no point. There's nothing I can do about it. So beating myself up at that point isn't going to be productive. So like you said, just kind of just separate it and just remind yourself there are other readers. Apparently, I don't read my Goodreads reviews. I don't. But my friends who said like, I checked it for you. You're getting good reviews. I'm like, okay, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, good, great. Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah.
And so something that we write into our books, because they're romance, are tropes. And so what tropes do you love to write? How do you decide what goes into which book? Does it come naturally, or do you really develop that in the very beginning with the plot? How does that work for you?
As for the tropes, Cecily ended up being a second chance romance because, like I said, it originally started as a novella. And one of the tips I got when I was writing it is to use a trope like second chance romance, reunited lovers, or friends to lovers, because there's already a relationship or foundation there. And that can do a lot of the heavy lifting for you because with a novella, we're just so limited in words count and time and space. So using a trope where they already have like a relationship or foundation there helps you out so much, and it helps the reader go along for the ride and buy into it that these two can just really fall in love in such a short span, as opposed to just having these two characters just meet for the first time. So that's kind of why I ended up using that as a trope. And as for Rachel, for me, it just made sense because personality-wise and like worldview-wise, Rachel and Luke are just very different people. He is just really more sure of himself, and in the way he moves in the world, he doesn't feel like there's a place where he doesn't belong. Like, why would there be? Whereas like Rachel always doesn't feel like she doesn't quite fit in, and they just have very opposite personalities. So it just so in a way it kind of depends on what the story is and what the characters are saying, and it kind of dictates what tropes to use. I love a good enemies to lovers romance. I love a good
Yeah.
battle of the sexes. It's why I love Julie James books, and it's why The Viscount Who Loved Me is my favorite Bridgerton book, because Kate and Anthony butt heads from the beginning.
Yeah.
So that's why that's a trope I love.
Okay. I
What
love
about yours?
I love it. I love enemies to lovers too. What is a trope that you have not yet written that you want to write?
Um, I feel like I really haven't gone enemies to lovers, and I feel like I just need to do that at one point and get it out of my system. Um, and I really want to see if I can make There's Only One Bed work.
Okay.
Because, in the Regency, it's kind of easy. Like the inn is just, all booked up, and yeah, that's the one. I do love a good, and sometimes it kind of depends, with opposites attract and enemies to lovers, because yes, they're opposites and they're at odds, but like I think part of why it's fun for me is because you see that underneath they really have more in common than they think. Like you have to have some form of shared values, because it's and I think what I love most about the enemies to lovers is they're fighting and they're at odds, but underneath there is like a maybe begrudging, but there's a level of respect there. Like you don't make someone your mortal enemy and want to like vanquish them unless unless they are equal. Like unless you recognize that game recognizes game and they are a worthy adversary. Like sometimes I feel like there's sometimes with some enemies to lovers book, they just hate each other. Like I feel like there's to have to be some antagonism, but underneath there's a respect and recognition of each other's like abilities and skills.
Yeah.
And I think that is the fun dynamic to play with.
Definitely is. Yeah. Figuring out how and where they do share commonality and exploring that in the process of falling in love, when at first glance they are enemies or rivals or adversaries. So it is a really fun one. There's built-in tension.
I feel like you did that really well with Bennett and Olivia, because on the surface, like they are just really different. Like Olivia is really about like focused on her family, like and tradition, and Bennett seems to be about like the new and the technology. But underneath, they're both really like they both really appreciate each other's abilities and the fact that they bring something to the table the other doesn't. And underneath, like they're both really both really looking for that same thing. I feel like connection and finding their place in the world, figuring out like where they fit in, because like you mentioned before, like both of them in some way feel like they don't really fit in one place or the other. And and so in a lot of ways, like I think that is something you dealt with so well in that book, because you show their antagonism, the differences they have like on the surface, but you also showed underneath like how much they really have in common. And I felt like that's what made their relationship believable. And really funny. Like I still die at that scene at the baseball game. That is one of my favorite scenes ever, because like it is so obvious who she is actually on that date with, and they're both so oblivious to it, and it's amazing, and I loved it.
Oh my gosh,
so good.
Thank you.
So good.
Thank you so much.
I was like, I wish I could have done that. So much fun.
It was one of my favorite scenes to write. For that reason, it's really, I thought the dialogue was fun, and the setting is fun. And yeah, as you said, kind of like, who are you really on the date with? Yeah. So thank you for your kind words. I appreciate it.
Of course.
So then and I think we probably talked about this when we were talking about your Cecily too, but what drew you to writing romance to begin with?
I think probably because I started reading romance when I was like a teenager. I started by reading more Roberts novels when I was 13, and it really helped me like get through a lot of tough times. it's talked about a lot on Twitter. I remember like when Julia Quinn gave a keynote speech at an RWA conference, and she was talking about how she got a letter from a reader saying how the reader and her mother were reading her Bridgerton books while her mother was going through chemo and things like that, and how like for that moment, like when they're reading their books, like they're just escaping into her world, and they can take their mind off of what's happening. You know, and through the romance community, I've met so many amazing friends, fellow writers, and some authors, and it's been such a really generous and amazing community.
Yeah.
I have had to rely on reading romance when I've gone through times like when my dad got sick, and I did the same thing that reader was doing, had to accompany him for treatment and things like that. Like I stopped a bunch of romances on my Kindle, and that's how I was there. Like that's how it helped me get through.
Mm-hmm.
So and you know, and sometimes I just think we need that dose of optimism and hope and the belief that things can and will be okay, because the world can be really scary, and sometimes good doesn't always prevail, but at least we know in romance it will.
Yeah.
Things will work out one way or another.
Yes. And in romance too, you can go through hard things and fall in love. And so you have that, like that really, I feel, captures a lot of life, where you could be going through grief, you could be going through hard things while having butterflies in your stomach and experiencing feelings of love, you know, going through hard things, even with your family and friends, and working through things like that. And as you said, the friendship is just as important as the romance itself. And I love that we get that with romance as well.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the core themes of romance is like, you may go through tough things, but you end up stronger and better for it. It doesn't break you, it makes you better. And I find that kind of inspiring. Like,
yeah,
when you're in the middle of the suck, you can't necessarily see it. Like, you know, like when you're struggling through these edits and you don't think you're ever going to make this book any decent, or like writers who are in the querying trenches or like on sub, it just feels like so hard. And then you come through it and like, oh, and you kind of realize, oh, I actually learned from that. I am better than that, I'm a better writer or whatever from it. And you know, it's hard at the time, but looking back, yeah. So at least for me.
Yes. So Your Cecily started as a novella, and so then you turned that into a book. How was the experience of writing the first book with the second book? And book 2 wasn't a novella, right?
No, it was under contract. It had to be 70 to 80,000.
Okay.
Well, one thing I learned, well, originally after my agent and I went through our own like revisions and edits, and she put it out on sub, it was actually around 90K. And as I mentioned, my contract says it needed to be 70 to 80. So I had to do a massive slash and burn.
Okay.
And I told myself, I never want to do this again. So that was a learning experience, right? That was going through something.
Yes.
And that was so that is a lesson I learned. And that is a mistake I did not make. I kept Rachel under 80 the whole. But like I mentioned before, I ran into a different set of problems because I sent in a draft to my editor, and then she got back to me, and she was right. And she said, I read a first bit. I think we need to talk, get on the same page, and get you back on track. And basically, it ended up being a pretty substantial rewrite. And I spent like 2 months reworking the whole thing while cannibalizing the hell out of my original draft as much as I could. But she was right. Like I had gone off course. I really didn't have the full grasp of who Rachel was, what she wanted to do, and why she wanted what she was doing. And I started the book in the wrong place. And originally, the book just started with the one night stand, but she said like we need to like build to that. So like that's why now the book starts with her getting the job and moving there. And part of it was like I just realized this part of the story is her journey about like self-acceptance and things. She's like, and having people around her saying you're good enough, you fit, and you belong. And then like the trip across the country made sense. Like this was her journey to find out where she belonged, and she found where she belonged. And I also like to joke she flew 3,000 miles because she wanted to get away from her bridezilla sister.
Yeah.
So, but really, it was just about her finding her place, and she found her place. But it took that conversation with my editor to kind of like figure out what the story needed to be, and buckling down for 2 months and rewriting it. It wasn't fun. I don't recommend it.
It happens. It is a real thing. That is, yep.
But I feel like I felt like the story is better and stronger for it, and I liked it a lot more. So she was right, which most editors most often are.
Totally. And yes, it's rough, but it's better. It's good. It's a good feeling when you come out on the other side and you're like, that was worth it. It was so much better, different, for different reasons. So that's great. That's great.
I mean, and I don't know about you, but like I console myself, like the scenes I cut, like I could just put into like a scrap file and I can like maybe reuse it, reuse it. Like that scene where or the first scene when we meet Luke, where like her coworker is like, seriously, Girl Scout cookies for your niece. Like I had a version of that scene in Cecily and it didn't work out and had to get cut. But I got to reuse it, right? So it wasn't a waste.
Yes.
So that's how I saw it. Like, I don't know if you do that. I don't know if you do that, but like I do it. Like I can reuse it, right?
Yeah. I haven't done it between books, but I've done it like, because I had a similar experience because I'm almost finished with revisions where I had to kind of rewrite a lot too. And I wrote a lot of new words. So it was coming out, I could see the light.
And your brain is fried and you were like, how did I do that?
Honestly,
my brain is mush. Yes, my brain is mush. Like, and you're like, I don't even know if these words make sense. But
you're like, someone will tell you, like hopefully, that's what the editor will tell you if what you've done is working. And that is so helpful because once you go through a rewrite like that, you are too deep into the forest. It is too hard to see if what you've done, you can read it as many times as you want, but you know so well what you were trying to do that it is very difficult to take a step back and see it for what it is.
Yeah, like that is one of the things like my editor and I worked on in the first and second book, because in my mind it made sense because I totally knew what I meant. Like like one of the comments I got from her was like, Cecily seems to have really like antagonistic like feelings about her family. And I was like, no, it's not that. It's just that she loves them, but they drive her nuts. And then she's like, and that is why there is that scene in Cecily where she just blurts that out to that random woman in the airport, like just to set the stage for that and have the reader understand where she's coming from. Like the way she put it was like, get them on the bus, get them on her side, and want to go on this ride for her and root for her.
Yeah.
And in similar way with Rachel, like I just really had to like really dig into like how she always just feels like she never knows the right thing to say or do, and doesn't feel like she always fits in, and she doesn't know where she'll ever find a place where she'll belong and feel accepted. And I thought that was what I had done, but I just needed to make sure it was actually on the page. And like you said, that is when you're too close, and you just need someone who could take the bird's eye view and say, this is maybe what you meant, but this is how it's coming across. So we need to adjust. This is what you need to do to make sure what you're saying, what you think you're saying.
Definitely. And then something you mentioned, and that happens in this book, is that Rachel moves across the country for a job. She goes across for a fresh start. She it's a whole new adventure for her. And so have you ever done something like that?
Um, I I guess the most similar thing would be when I left college.
Yeah.
I went somewhere that was about like 4 or 5 hours away. It was important to me that I kind of got that college experience. But on the other hand, like I wasn't going to be too far away. If something were to happen, I couldn't get home quickly, and where my parents could come to me quickly. I'm from Pennsylvania, and I had also applied to Boston University,
Yeah.
and my mom and my parents were like, no, that is just too far away. Like, what if something happened? We wouldn't be able to get to you. And my mother was like, also, the winters are too cold, they're too awful out there. So like where I went, I was a couple of hours away. So I felt like I got that away college experience. And so, it was the first time I was like really on my own. And so like, kind of like Rachel engraced like the change and the experience and the adventure. Like, she was all in. Like she went and got her library card. She went and signed up for the rewards program at the supermarket. Like she was all in.
She was all over it. Yeah.
She was she committed, y'all. She did. But I am not that embracing of change as she is. I joke and I talk to my friend Sally, who's an Aquarius, and that's kind of like, maybe she's an Aquarius. That's why I made her Aquarius. Like maybe they embrace the change and aren't, but that was the first time that I was like really away from family, and it was an adjustment, but I ended up having a blast in college. It was the best 4 years. It was great. But what about you? Like, have you had to do a move like that as well?
I have moved all over the country so many times. So when it comes to Rachel, I was like, yep, yeah, I get it. Been there. Yeah, literally have lived on both coasts. Now I'm obviously like not surrounded by water. I'm in Nashville. So my first time kind of being in the middle, or at least not near a big body of water. So yeah, I definitely understood kind of what that experience would have been like for Rachel.
Yeah, I mean, and so I am just a total heathen Yankee. I've lived above the Mason-Dixon line my whole life, but like this is something you can, because now you're in the South, so like maybe I'm just generalizing, and you can tell me if I wasn't accurate. But in the book, and like I like to call my friend Sally Kilpatrick my Southern authenticity reader, but like you can tell me if you think it's accurate that like there are like quite a bit of similarity between like Southern values and like and Asian values about respecting your elders and appearances and manners and and all that kind of stuff. So like maybe you could like talk about that a bit more accurately than I can, because I have no connection to the South except the food. I love the food.
I've only been here a year, so I feel like I don't quite know yet. And Nashville is so, I think, a little bit different. Is kind of what I've heard. So yeah, still just kind of like getting acquainted with everything. But that seems, there definitely is like respect for the elders, appearances, kind of everything you said. But yeah, I mean, it's been great so far.
And the food, oh God.
The food is so good. I mean, I miss a lot of the Asian food that I got in California, but there's really good food here.
Yeah. And apparently like a Czech battle thing is also a Southern thing as well. So that is very Asian. Like I have like witnessed my uncles like yelling and yelling at each other to pay the check. So like, yeah, it's a whole thing. And the food, like you're constantly being fed. If you're in an Asian household, you're constantly being fed. And I feel like that is also like a Southern thing too. Like they will always like feed you. So yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, super interesting parallels.
Yeah. So, but maybe, but if you spend more time there, you can let me know if I was totally wrong about that.
Yes, time will tell.
I've always wanted to visit Nashville though.
Well, you should.
Yeah.
You should come visit.
I will.
Okay.
And it sounds like you guys have a ton of great like local bookstores and independent bookstores in there.
Oh my gosh,
too.
we have the best bookstores, honestly, so good. Yeah, and surprisingly, because I thought I would have more of this kind of community in LA, is there's an amazing romance community here of like, but like I actually feel like I see a lot of the authors and the readers, and I think LA is tough because no one wants to drive the highway. No one wants to it'll take like 2 hours just to get over to Santa Monica. And so
Really?
I mean, it depends where you're coming from, but there's a lot of traffic. And so here it's like, it's so easy to get places off highway. Like sometimes it's faster to get places off the highway than it is on. So like, I'm always on, like, I call them like the back roads, but they're not like back roads to what I think people understand back roads to be. I'm just like, oh, it's not the highway, which I prefer. And so, I've like met so many amazing readers and authors who are in part of the romance community here. And I feel like I, like for the first time in my life, have a community, which is so special.
Yeah. I mean, I have been so happy for you to see what a great reception Lunar Love's been getting, like, and how well readers have responded. And I'm like, and deservedly so. You wrote an amazing book.
Thank
I'm
you.
just so glad that it's reaching the readers it needs to reach, and that you're getting, and you're getting such great momentum from it. And like, I love the pictures on Instagram where you're like, when you got to meet with readers, especially when I think we were out in LA. Like, that was
my gosh.
amazing.
Yes, amazing. It was
Yeah.
really cool because I met readers who had been so supportive from the very beginning, even before Lunar Love came out. And it was so fun to meet them. And like, we DM all the time. And so to meet them in person was like so cool, like such a cool experience.
Yes. And I am so grateful like that we met, and like you have been amazingly supportive of my books as well. And I so appreciate that.
Oh my gosh,
and,
of course.
And I'm so excited. Is there anything you can share, like when your next book is coming? You have a release date yet, or is there anything you can tease us about it?
So more to come in like the next month. But yes, it's book 2 should be coming out next year, and like early next year. And it is already on Goodreads. So it's called Red String Theory. And so you can go at it, but there will be more details coming soon, which I'm super excited. I love the story so much.
Aww.
I can't wait to talk more about it. But that leads me to my next question.
I can't wait to read it.
Yeah, I can't wait for you to read it too. What are you working on next?
I am working on book 3, which is titled Bethany Meets Her Match. So I think you can tell whose book this is.
Yay. Bethany Meets Her Match. Okay. Exciting.
Yes. And I met her hero is someone you haven't met yet. It's totally new. So like you don't need to guess who it is. And I really had a fun time writing Bethany and Cecily, like how she just scared the hell out of everyone. And and the way like, and Jeffrey, like that scene when Jeffrey's like, you want to kid me, don't you?
Do you have a release date?
It's scheduled for October, but it's not like firm yet. So there's just been some production issues, so it might need to be delayed. But right now it's scheduled for October.
Okay, exciting.
Because this one's going to involve mooncakes, Lauren.
Oh, I love it! I can't wait.
The Mid-Autumn Festival.
Mid-Autumn, yay! Moon Festival. That'll be perfect.
So hopefully we'll see how it works.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Exciting.
Yes. And Karen and Mandy have both asked for a book for Adrian. So I don't know. We'll have to see about that.
There we go.
I have to tell Thule. I have to tell Thule the demand is there.
There's demand. Yes. So are you?
String theory sounds really great. So I'm excited for you.
Thank you. I'm very excited about it. It's very special to my heart. So are you like editing that? Is it done? Where are you in the process?
I am editing Bethany's book right now.
Okay.
So it's just and I don't know about you, but for me, it's especially because these two releases have been pretty close together.
Yeah.
And it's been like I was I was editing and proofreading and doing copy edits for Cecily while I was drafting Rachel. And then I was doing that. And then I was doing copy edits for Rachel, and then promoting Cecily while still trying to draft Bethany's book. So it's been like a big like learning curve and trying to figure out how my brain works and how it's juggling. So and one of the things I really appreciated about like my agent was when we were talking about it, and she said, like, let's see about giving you as much time as we can, because this is going to be the first time you're navigating multiple books in different stages of production, and you need time to figure out your process. So so I'm learning how to juggle all that, and it can be hard to switch gears because you're drafting mode, and then you have to go to editing mode, which is a whole different side of your brain, and then promo mode. It's a lot. It can be overwhelming for sure.
I'm over here taking deep breaths because I'm like, I relate to this.
Right?
I'm like, yep. Yeah. It's totally new. Each phase brings new challenges, which is exciting, but also just have to balance that and understand that context switching and what that looks like for you, and what I think new priorities emerge where you're like, your mental health is important too, and getting rest is important. And these are all kind of new things to navigate.
And I think this is what it comes back to, what we were talking about finding your community. And I think it's important for writers to have that community to go to where they can like talk about these things, and they can say, no, this is normal. Breathe, you'll be fine. Like, and sometimes there's just some issues that only a fellow like writer can really understand. You can have the most amazing and supportive spouse, but they may not totally understand why you're like up at 2 a.m. staring at the keyboard and banging your head because these characters are just not cooperating. And sometimes like only a fellow author can understand, like, girl, you just need to take a shower and like turn your brain off and let it work.
That's where it happens. Yeah.
And I think it's important that you have a community where you can have these conversations with, because, I know sometimes for me, like you need to remind yourself, like, you get curated highlights on social media when people are announcing a cover reveal or a deal announcement or a release day. Like, I think it's important, like, behind the scenes, we are all just in our pajamas in a zombie with our hair like we haven't washed in like 3 days or something like that.
That is also real. Yeah.
I mean, I am just so grateful. I have like writing friends like you I can talk to about these things. I remember we were just talking about like a couple of weeks leading up to debut, like both of us were like, I'm really so nervous about this. Or like, is this normal? I'm like, I think so.
Completely. Yes. And that will happen again. And before every release, I'm sure we'll be messaging being like,
What if nobody reads this book? What if everybody hates it? And I have to be like, Lauren, don't be silly. You wrote a great book. Nobody's going to hate it. Or if they do, they just don't, they don't have taste. It's okay.
Yeah. They're so different book to book too, that, it's not the same book. So lots of things, lots of new feelings, and definitely having an author community and other writers to talk to has been huge. Yeah.
And I also feel like it's also part of like the pressure we put on ourselves. Like, is this the best we can do? And you also want to feel like you're improving with every book. So, and in some ways, I feel like I know authors who are like writing, the more books there are, it's harder because they feel like they, like you want, especially because the first book with your debut, like this is the book, you're still writing for the joy of it. It's fun, and you spend days, weeks, months, years polishing this baby. And then suddenly, like, you have the grind of writing under contract, and it's a business and it's a job, So like, so in some ways, like, it gets harder in that way because like, it's not just about the joy anymore, though I'll never lose that joy. But
exactly.
So it, I mean, hopefully, like I'm reading the book and I feel like I did a lot. Hopefully I'm just improving with every book, and that should be the goal. Hopefully,
Yes.
So.
Yep. Definitely. Yeah. Okay. Well, we are at the top of the hour. I want to end on one more question.
Sure.
What are you reading now?
Well, I am so glad you asked. I am reading an early copy of Stacey Ager's Benign Mitzvah, which is coming out on June 1st. It was just a book in her new series, which I'm really excited about. And then you know, and then I and then state Kelly Kane had a new book out recently that I just, and then I'm looking, and Jen Trin had a Coming Clean, a novel that came out at the beginning of May, which I'm reading right now, which I really
Nice.
loved. And I'm look and Laura Lee Gerke has a book out next month that I'm really, really looking forward to. What books are your TBR? Like, hurt my wallet some more, right?
Oh my gosh, I know. So I have been in revision, so I've been reading my own book over. So I feel like I'm so craving other people's words for the moment where I'm like, I can't wait to read again, because when I'm in deep revisions and on a tight timeline, it is really difficult to find time to read. Like I have no problem reading while I'm writing or editing. It's only like because of the time thing where I'm like, I don't have the time. So now I am starting to have time. And I'm reading Banyan Moon by Tao Tai right now, which loving. Her writing is amazing. She writes a lot of like articles and she has a great newsletter. Love her writing. So that is coming out in June. Very excited for that. I recently read Dominic Lim's All the Right Notes. It also comes out
Oh.
June 6th, and that is it's so great. It just felt like such a hug. It's a really wonderful one. So add that to your list to read. I have so many on my TBR, but gosh, I'm like surrounded by books right now. I'm like, I don't know. Yeah,
Totally.
those are two. And then I just recently also read The True Love Experiment by Christina Lauren, which was wonderful because I love Fizzy. Talk about side characters getting their own book. Yay. We love when side characters, best friends get their happy ever after too. So that one was really fun. Laugh out loud. Very, very funny. Like one-liners that you're like, oh, that's so good. So yeah, those are a few. Add those to your list.
I love some good banter.
Yes, me too.
Yes.
Me too. My favorite.
Like, I wish I could be some of those characters sometimes because they always have like the right response in the moment. And then it's only like when you get home and you're in bed, like stewing over for 2 hours, and then you're like, that is what I should have said.
And funny because that is what you have when you're writing these characters, right? You have 2 hours to think about what the response will be. So
it's almost like a superpower. Like, I wish I
Yeah.
had to be able to have that, like, come back, like, in the moment.
To be that fast of like, oh, that's funny, that's quick, that gets my point across.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Look, this has been so much fun. Thank you for doing this, Lauren. I
Thank
so
you.
appreciate it. Thank you. It's been so much
Congratulations. The Rachel
Thank
Experiment
you.
is out. Go get it. Such a fun read. And then also get the Year of Cecily so you can get your fill of Cecily. Because there's a lot of backstory
And be on the
there.
lookout for the for string theory, y'all.
Yes. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you. And at first I was like, I remember you told me about what the string was. I'm like, if she's going physics on me, like string theory.
There's a little bit of that. There's a little bit, yeah.
Okay, as long as a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, I'm still traumatized because I remember in high school, like, someone from the guidance department hated me and scheduled me for physics at 7:25 a.m. in the morning, first class. And I'm like, someone in the guidance department hated me.
Oh my gosh. 7:25. Too
That was
early.
Exactly.
Physics.
Thank you. That's been so
Yes,
much
thank
fun.
you. Of